1947. A secret telegram was sent by a group of Arab mujahideen in Yemen to the first secretary of the Arab League, Abdul Rahman Azam Bacha. Urgent and top secret. A French ship arrived at Aden's port today with a sheikh bound in chains, suspected to be the legendary Islamic hero who disappeared 20 years ago. The ship is heading to France and will pass through Egypt's Port Said tomorrow, so it is necessary to be alerted. As soon as Azam Basha finished reading this telegram, he immediately requested an urgent meeting with King Farouk to discuss the matter of this dangerous telegram that had just arrived to him from the Bab al-Mandab Strait. A secret discussion took place between Azam Basha and King Farouk in his residence palace. And it was nothing but moments later, a decision was issued to the Egyptian officers in the Suez Canal to intercept that French ship and bring that old man to the royal palace in Cairo to confirm his identity. Less than 24 hours later, the Egyptian officers brought to the king an old man with a beard as white as snow, walking with steady, albeit slow, steps. Among the sunken features of his face are signs of greatness and nobility that are not hidden from anyone. He wears very simple white clothing, and signs of chains and wreaths appear on his hands and legs, as if they had been carved into his skin. When this old man was in the hands of King Farouk, the king of Egypt asked him about his identity, so the old man raised his gaze. He raised his head and looked at the king with eyes like the eyes of a prey falcon, then said with all dignity and confidence, "I am Prince Mohammed ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi." Let's dip our toes into the waters of history and turn west from Cairo, specifically to the town of Agadir in the Islamic Moroccan countryside. There, a man of Berber Amazigh tribe called Abdul Karim al-Khattabi gives birth to a baby boy, whom he names as a blessing after the messenger of God, the Prophet Muhammad. Abdul Karim al-Khattabi was the tribe's judge, and he decided to raise his son in a good manner from an early age. And indeed, he taught him himself the Arabic language and the Quran. Then he sent him to Al-Qarawiyyin University in the city of Fes to study their hadith and Islamic jurisprudence. It was only a few years until Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi became the chief judge in the city of Melilla, Morocco, while still in his youth. The Khattabi family was known for the academic and political standing of its men, who held political and judicial positions in the central and western countryside regions. The professional career of Muhammad al-Khattabi began in Melilla, where he worked as a teacher for 5 years. He then worked as a translator and writer in the central administration, as well as a journalist. Following in his father's footsteps, he was appointed as a judge in 1913 and later promoted to the position of chief judge at the young age of 32. At that time, the circumstances in Islamic Maghreb were more challenging than one could imagine. The colonial exploitative powers realized that the lands of Islamic Maghreb were a breeding ground for heroes throughout history. It was from there that the Mujahideen of the Almoravids went to Al-Andalus, and from there, the forces of the Almohad Caliphate set sail to Europe. The first Islamic battalions set out to Europe under the leadership of Tariq ibn Ziyad. Up to this stage, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi believed in peaceful coexistence with the colonizer and held a respected position with the colonial authorities. He had even applied for Spanish nationality twice without success. However, the turning point in his political awareness came as a result of the upcoming event. The European countries decided to end this Islamic threat, convening the Green Island Conference in 1906 with the participation of 12 European countries. For the first time in history, the name America emerged, breaking the Monroe Doctrine principle, which stipulates non-American intervention in international politics. All these nations gathered to end this enduring Islamic nightmare forever. The final decision of this conference, the division of the lands of Islamic Maghreb. What's astonishing is that these countries didn't stop at dividing the Islamic Maghreb kingdom, but they did so in a malicious manner unheard of by the world before. They ensured its fragmentation permanently. France took the southern part of the Maghreb kingdom, known as Mauritania. Spain took the part just north of it, known as the Western Sahara. Then, once again, France claimed the area north of the Sahara, the present-day Central Maghreb, while Spain took the northern coastal region of Morocco, the Moroccan Reef. In between, Germany and Britain occupied cities here and there. Everyone believed they had thus ended Islamic presence in the land of Maghreb forever. However, Abdul Karim al-Khattabi and his son Muhammad, may God reward them, had a different plan in mind. The political scene in the Reef was extremely complex, characterized by Spanish, French, and German competition, both at the intelligence level and through the influence on Moroccan parties, like the Khattabi family, in favor of this colonial project. Gradually, the relationship between the Khattabi family and the Spanish administration shifted from coexistence to estrangement. Al-Khattabi and his son Muhammad began to put their secret plans into action, starting by uniting the warring tribes under the banner of Islam and corresponding with the Ottoman Caliph in the capital of the Caliphate. At that point, the Spanish killed the Mujahid Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, may God have mercy on him, and captured his son Muhammad and placed him in one of the prisons atop a mountain in Morocco. In a legendary and indescribable manner, the young hero managed to craft a rope from his bed sheet to free himself from the prison window. Unfortunately, the rope was not long enough to reach al-Khattabi from the mountaintop to the ground. But our hero jumped from a great height onto the hard rocks, shattering his legs and losing consciousness from the severe impact before the prison authorities discovered his escape and returned him to captivity. After some time in restriction, Prince Mohammed ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi emerged from prison to organize an army of just 3,000 fighters from the tribes of the Moroccan Reef. Pioneering a new form of military combat, he was the first to utilize it in the history of warfare, termed guerrilla warfare. This form of military strategy, based on tactics of ambush and hit and run, was later adopted by revolutionaries worldwide. Then, Prince Mohammed created another interesting resistance system, acknowledged by the Vietnamese leader, Ho Chi Minh, who mentioned that he drew inspiration from Prince al-Khattabi's tactics in the fight against Americans years later. This system involved digging extended underground trenches, reaching the enemy's barracks, and thanks to his genius, this Islamic hero was able to teach the Spanish army a new lesson every day during the battles. As losses mounted for the Spanish in the Islamic countryside, the King of Spain, Alfonso XIII, sent a whole army from Madrid, led by his friend General Silvestre. In parallel, Prince al-Khattabi was presented with a proposal, allowing Spanish penetration into the depths of Moroccan Reef, in exchange for arming the Reef army to fight alongside Spain against France, in addition to a sum of 20 million. Our hero refused the offer, and they clashed in the legendary Battle of Anwal, where a disciplined Spanish army of 60,000 soldiers, with their airplanes and tanks, faced only 3,000 Muslim fighters, armed with primitive rifles. However, both sides had their faith in God. One fought for God and the love of country, and the other for land and the cross. Truly, God granted victory to the believers, and indeed, the 3,000 Muslim fighters under the leadership of the legendary al-Khattabi triumphed over a full army of 60,000 Crusader fighters. The Muslims killed 18,000 Spaniards and captured tens of thousands of invaders. Only 600 Spanish soldiers survived, fleeing to Spain like scared dogs to tell the horrors they witnessed in the Moroccan countryside to their king. After this, Prince al-Khattabi established the Islamic Reef Emirate in northern Islamic Maghreb. During his 5-year rule, he taught people the true Islamic religion, free from superstitions and heresies. He then sent scientific missions to countries worldwide and united the warring tribes under the banner of Islam. But, as expected, after every Islamic awakening, the Crusader nations gathered once again, united only in fighting Muslims. They sensed the threat of the emerging Islamic State, which, if left unchecked, would alter the course of history. So, they formed an alliance of 500,000 European soldiers with their tanks, airplanes, and warships, creating a big global army to fight only a mere 20,000 mujahideen. It was going to be the end of everything al-Khattabi built in his entire years, but what happened next was really surprising. The European alliance came this time with a global force, in a mission to destroy not just Prince Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, but to delete the entire Islamic Maghreb from existence, 500,000 soldiers, to face only 20,000 Muslim mujahideen. France began to tighten the noose around al-Khattabi, intervening to provoke him militarily. However, he remained committed not to fight on two fronts, until there was nothing left for the European armies, but to agree on fighting the prince. The European force assembled an army of 500,000 fighters, armed with the latest combat tools, directed towards the Moroccan Rif front, under the command of Marshal Ince Khan, who was familiar with the region's geography and military tactics of the Rif tribes due to his affiliation. A brutal war was waged against the tribes, using banned international war tactics and gases, such as poisonous gases and chemical weapons like mustard gas, which was first deployed by Spanish aircraft, and its effects are still visible to this day. However, the biggest surprise took place. The Mujahideen, under the leadership of the warrior prince, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, emerged victorious in all the battles they fought, inflicting continuous losses upon the invaders. This forced the allied European armies to bribe some deviant Sufi groups. These traitors fought against Prince al-Khattabi, who had been combating the Sufi heresies of dancing, mysticism, and unapproved gatherings. They issued a fatwa forbidding fighting with al-Khattabi, and shortly after, French and Spanish planes dropped chemical weapons and toxic gases on civilians. Simultaneously, the English fleet blockaded the Moroccan coasts. The Prince al-Khattabi refused to give up under any circumstances. He fought a global coalition of traitors and crusaders, while only 200 mujahideen remained, pledged to martyrdom under his leadership. These few fought valiantly like lions until the crusaders grew desperate in their defeat. At that point, the European alliance resorted to an age-old yet novel tactic. After a big defeat for the European alliance, they were desperate to defeat this genius leader. And so they used a shameless tactic that so many countries around the globe still use to date. The Crusaders resorted to requesting reconciliation with Prince Muhammad, while giving the Muslims documented guarantees for the safety of all mujahideen and providing the people of Maghreb with the means of decent living in all freedom and independence. But as usual, the Crusaders violated their treaties. They kidnapped the legendary warrior prince, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi, and exiled him to an island in the Indian Ocean, not for a year or two, but for a continuous 20 years. This hero spent these 2 decades in captivity, advocating for human rights, imprisoned by those who proclaimed the ideals of the French Revolution to the world: égalité, liberté, fraternité. But what freedom do you claim in imprisoning a weak old man for 20 years? After more than 20 years in exile, they decided to move him to France. And while the ship was passing through Port Said in Egypt, al-Khattabi requested political asylum from King of Egypt Farouk, which was immediately granted. He stayed in Egypt until his death. In Cairo, he resumed the resistance by calling for the independence of Morocco from French and Spanish colonial forces. And from there, he also supported, through the Voice of the Arabs radio station, liberation movements in neighboring Islamic countries such as Algeria, Libya, Tunisia, and other Arab Islamic nations. Our prince did not accept positions, grants, or money. The parliament allocated a special grant to him for supporting the liberation movements, but he refused to accept it. Thus, the freedom fighter remained active and steadfast until his death on February 6, 1963, at the age of about 80. This was after the liberation and independence of Morocco from French and Spanish colonization, and he was buried in the Martyrs' Cemetery in Cairo. My dears, the story of today was about this great prince, Muhammad ibn Abdul Karim al-Khattabi. This magnificent prince and great leader was not just a judge, but a chief justice. He had such a wonderfully balanced character, who stood in the face of an European oppressive power. That was the 3rd strongest power in the world. This genius leader courageously opposed this colonization and taught it several lessons. They could not stop him, or overpower him. Europe's story is quite strange. It claims to be democratic and it claims to protect human rights. It claims to support freedom, yet it treads upon people's freedoms. This destruction that Europe did in the entire Maghreb was also done in Lebanon, Egypt, Palestine, Syria, and Iraq, as well as in the southwest of Yemen. The European forces were aggressive towards many countries in the world. Whether they were Muslim or not, Europe would profess one thing, yet do the opposite. You want to know the worst part about this European propaganda? I don't think it's the last.